My apologies to everybody, but ladies and gentlemen, I could not be more excited for another episode of Real Time Coaching Lab. My computer, like human experience, had the black screen of death, but we have Carl Gambino on here today. And so, look, I could not be more grateful to have Carl here today because, when you think of Carl, you think of one of the top luxury agents in the country, works in all of these different markets, has a huge team, is in magazines and media. But, I think the best part that we're going to get to experience today is who Carl is as a person, right? And how he got to where he got to. And, it's kind of maybe a little biased of me to say, but I think this is going to be my favorite episode that we've ever done. So, Carl, just quickly introduce yourself and then we'll hop right into your journey.
Thank you. Well, that's very nice to say this might be your favorite. You might be disappointed, I'm not sure. Um, just to introduce myself, I'm Carl Gambino. I run the Gambino Group. We function in New York, LA, Miami, the Hamptons, the North Fork, and New Jersey. And to my understanding, we're the first team at Compass. They've let do that many markets. I had to convince Refkin and Rory, who thought I was insane.
Yeah, well, actually, in 7 years of being here, yes, I do know that's a fact. It's hard for people to do one extra market that many, but so people see this person today, right? And I always find it's really interesting. You can look at a person's resume, you can look at what they're doing, and people generally come to their own thoughts. So let's go back to the beginning, right? Like you have really humble beginnings, and did you start off in some circle and had a network of really affluent people, or did you start off on the opposite side of the coin?
No, not in any way. I was born in New York City. I moved to New Jersey when I was really young, which I was furious about. My whole family was in Soho. My grandmothers are still there. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, basically, and my father was a bank teller. My dad would like give my mom $200 for 2 weeks. But one thing I really learned from my dad, which was amazing, was he had an incredible work ethic. Like he would work 7 days a week. On the weekends, he would do odd jobs, things like that. And that was something I really picked up from him from a very early age. And so, honestly, I didn't even know a wealthy person until I was an adult.
So when you started getting as an adult, right, what made you want to get into real estate?
I mean, very early on, I was attracted to real estate. I've shared this before in some other podcasts and things where I would spend a lot of time in Greenwich Village where my grandmothers live, and I just associated real estate with wealth. Like one family member of mine, I guess back in the day, owned a townhouse, but they were like bootleggers, then they went broke. And I always was like, how could they have let go of that property really from a very early age? I would sit on the stoops of properties. There were people like Patty Smith and other people in the area who bought properties and kind of would real estate shame me and tell me, your family should have bought these. They could have bought them for nothing, but they didn't have money. I mean, they could have probably pooled money together. And so I think, sorry, from a very young age, I had like a chip on my shoulder about real estate and was like, oh, my family should have bought this. And I knew it was something I wanted to be involved in, especially own. And then I remember when I was in high school, I had older friends that could drive, and I would make them drive me around to see mansions and things like that. So I don't know what originally sparked it, but it was something I've always been obsessed with.
So you've been a dreamer your whole life.
Definitely to the point where like the background I come from is very much get any job, like pursue kind of mediocrity in a sense. And um, I always had this overwhelming ambition, like to the point where when I was a little kid, I didn't even know what it was. And I was like a huge dreamer, and I almost like stuffed it down and was embarrassed by it because of the environment I grew up in and the type of people I was around. Like, where they'd be like, what do you think you're going to be rich? Or you think money grows on trees or things like that.
Well, here's the interesting part, right? A lot of us can find ourselves in these environments where we feel that we think one way and everyone thinks somewhere else. What would you say your key to success in really like having a larger mindset than everything that was around you?
I think I don't know how, but I always knew that I wanted something greater. I have a very obsessive mind. My mind, I could never like stop my mind as a kid. And I think I think I was about, I don't know, 17, 18-ish. Someone gave me a self-development book. I talk about it a bunch. It's Think and Grow Rich. It's a super famous book, but I read it and it was like life-changing for me in that sense at that time, but I wasn't mature enough to really understand it and apply it, but I knew it helped me be like, I want to get out of my old negative mindset and the way that I grew up. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, from the time I read that book to still today, I'm 39, I listen or read those books daily, like pretty much daily, or listen to biographies or podcasts or things that are really motivating, because I almost found it like a drug where I was like, oh, if I do this constantly, it makes me not succumb to my own negative obsessive thinking. And then over time, I did the things in the books and applied what it said. And then I was able to constantly elevate my mind and build my mind. Like I've said this before, it's kind of like going to the gym for your mind. And I think the original time I read that sparked at least my interest in that and changing the way that I thought.
I think it's really interesting because people see like this one-to-one correlation. Like I read a book, I can use it, but what I think what a lot of people don't realize is you're subtly programming your subconscious mind. Like all those things that you read in a book that didn't make sense, all of a sudden one day we get into life, you're like, oh yeah, that's what the book was saying, and it's much easier to implement it. So as you've gone through this journey of personal development, right? When you got into real estate, like what type of properties, like what type of people did you work with? Because you didn't have the network, right? So we know that you had to go find the network. What was that 0 to 1 journey like for you?
Well, my original introduction was into commercial where you have to go to the office and cold call all day long. So basically, I was able to start meeting people in that sense. I mean, it was not easy. Like I'd call people, some of them would talk to you. A huge amount of them were time wasters. A lot of them were like, you know what, fuck you and hang up. Like I remember I actually developed, like I'd call them and just be like, did we get disconnected? Or I would like joke with them and eventually sometimes break people. But that was great training for me, especially in terms of adversity. Like it was every day, just people like just no, 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 a million times.
You
And
got comfortable with rejection.
yeah, and a lot of the older brokers in the business told me they're like, this is just the game. Like it could take you 2 years to make a deal. The market had crashed at that time. It took me about a year to make a sale. So I started meeting people in that sense, and I would make tons of phone calls. Like I like try to make 100 phone calls a day. I did that for a bit. I didn't, it just like kind of wasn't my like true love of real estate. I knew I loved real estate, but it wasn't commercial in a sense. Then I did residential leasing in the summers in New York City, and I made a bunch of money for me at the time. I would blow it all, but it was great training. I talk about this all the time. It was like someone called you from an ad. They basically hated you. They had to pay you a huge fee. You had to charm them, convert them from hating you to paying you a fee and doing a deal within one day on open listings that you were beating out other brokers. And that was
That was like the
excellent.
Craigslist days, right? Where they had the ads on Craigslist and everything.
100%. Like we'd post like a West Village 2 bedroom, we get 500 calls and then have to convert them. And from there, I kind of quit the business, went to LA, did all creative things, and got back in the business. And at that time, I knew I had to get into the circles of the mega wealthy if I wanted to really be successful. And I quickly identified in LA that if I was doing real estate there, if I worked with entertainment clients, that's a huge component of the high end of LA. And I knew I could like rapidly expand my business if I somehow broke into that type of clientele. So I kind of I shifted the way I did things once I moved to LA.
So, all right, before we go to this next chapter, because this is like a perfectly scripted movie that we're going through here, Carl, is if you see one of the things I want all of you on here to be really present to, Carl never cheated himself out of the process, right? Like if you look at where you are today, I don't think anyone realizes it's never heard you speak before, the actual process and the story arc of how you got here, right? So cold calling, grit, getting used to rejection, like doing things like no one wants to do open lease rentals and run around. And, when you answer a Craigslist ad, you're like already pissed off, right? So it's like the broker's fees in New York are not fun. So it's like, all right, here. So I'm looking at a common theme, Carl. It's like you get to this next place and then you start over again. You get to this next place and you start over again. So, everyone wants to know, how do I work with luxury people, right? And like, you went to LA and you're like, all right, I'm going to get into these entertainment circles. What did you like? What did you actually do? Because it's not easy to be in a room in the space with these kinds of people.
I mean, one thing I forgot to mention is growing up, I got in tons of trouble and went through like a lot of pain and heartbreak and all these type of things. And have a bit of a crazy background. And that also made me resilient and have thick skin, which is exactly what you need in this business to get to the absolute high end. And I would be able to look at real estate or going after huge clients or deals and be like, look, if I could do a bunch of the things that I've been through or get through things that I have before, I could easily do that. And I think no matter what people have gone through in life in terms of sales, you have to preface it in your mind that way, where you have to diminish that it's hard. And I'm not saying it's not, and you don't have to put in the effort, but the more you think you can do the things, that's what I quickly learned too, then you could do them. And then when I got to LA, by that point, I had read so many self-development books and, like I said, on a routinely basis. So I knew what to do in the sense of those books. I didn't know anyone. I had no money. I was in a rent-controlled apartment. I was walking dogs, working for 12.50 an hour on odd jobs. I just basically wrote down all the types of clients I was going to get, how I was going to get them, and I still read these things out loud daily now, where I would be like, I'm going to attract and work with these type of clients. I'm going to do this by networking. I'm going to get invited to these events, and I was very specific on it. And I went out 7 days a week, like, constantly. I still do that almost. And I told everyone on the planet about what I was doing in real estate. And I did associate myself with a huge broker in LA, and I found an in to work with a huge broker there. And I mean, I really leveraged just his name to the point where like I'd meet someone and they'd be like, "Oh, you're like a fucking dog walker," and I'd be like, "No, I work with this guy. I do real estate as well." And from there, that was like I had trained myself enough in that sense that I could leverage that. And honestly, it was tons of self work. I think you and I might have talked about this once before, but I like Jim Rohn, the speaker, and he talks about how you work more on yourself than your job, and then your job becomes huge. That's exactly what I did. And sometimes I didn't even realize it, but I was brainwashing myself constantly with positive material. And most people probably don't even have to do it as much as I did. It was just more like where I came from was so, I came from an amazing, loving family, just to be clear, but like the mindset of where you could go was pretty limiting. And I was just obsessed with that and obsessed with getting out of that. And now, even at this stage, I constantly work on, and especially with our agents, mind elevation and where we can get to. Like, I got a call yesterday from someone I've been pursuing for 13 weeks. Like, they haven't responded for me to me for 13 weeks. And finally they responded to me and they're like, Jesus, like we'll work with you. And there's a way to follow up without being annoying. Um, but that's kind of how I started the process. I wrote down and identified the type of clients, and then I started to pursue them. I was fortunate that I quickly met some entertainment people by going out in LA. I don't think that's coincidence. Honestly, I know it's not. I had identified it, wrote it down, attracted it, and then they gave me, I did a few deals, and then some of the entertainment people saw me do that and then gave me opportunity, which then got me a bunch of press and recognition after I sold their properties. And then I, from there, quickly understood that I needed to target business managers, because business managers or family offices would have,
Gatekeepers.
what would you say?
They're the gatekeepers.
Exactly. And I would do the job. And that's another thing. Like, I'm obsessed with doing the job to the fullest effect. I would obsessively learn the data. I talk about this a lot too. And I didn't realize at the time, by learning that data, it gave me this like subconscious confidence where I met someone, even if I had no experience, I knew everything. Like, I knew who sold what on what street, who bought, who was buying and selling, what brokers did it, what top brokers were doing it, what things were selling for. So where someone met me, and even if they didn't even kind of question my experience, because they're like, oh, this guy's like a killer that I can trust with my assets. Some people even wanted me to be, they wanted to contribute to my and be my biggest deal because they liked me and felt like I was a hard worker that really knew my stuff. And I find that still, like, even as I go to higher and higher levels, if you're good enough at sales and you know the information and you're going and they can sense you're going to do an excellent job and you're authentic, people honestly want to be, they want to contribute to your success. Where I think a lot of salespeople get afraid and they're like, oh, I haven't done this, so I can't do it. But I like to look at it differently.
I think it's that mindset, right? And the biggest thing that I want you all to take away is you program your subconscious mind. It can't delineate the difference between a negative and positive thought, right? So if his brain is a hard drive, all the programs he's installing them are belief, vision. And when you start seeing it, then all of a sudden it's like when you go, right, Carl? It's like when you go to a car and you see like the red Ferrari. Never seen a red Ferrari in your life. And now all of a sudden you go look at it once and you start seeing the cars everywhere. It's because now your brain is actually looking for it. So, in getting in here, now you've built yourself, established what vision, or who wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I want to build a team and I'm going to learn how to work in all of these different markets, because you're the only person, candidly, I've ever known or seen. And thanks to Julian who introduced us. But how did you have this idea that I want to work in all of these different markets, and what made you select those specific markets?
One thing is like I'm a restless person, so I think it's amazing that I get to travel and do business everywhere, but I kind of also just followed where my clients went and were buying, and I started to quickly notice that the people would buy an LA house, a New York apartment, a Miami house, and even not even at the like of course at the ultra high end, but even people would buy $2 million houses in each. And I I knew New York, like I knew every street categorically in my mind. I understood the streets. I knew I had some real estate background, so it wasn't hard for me to start doing deals in New York. And I started telling my LA clients, look, I have my license in New York still, and I moved it to a big broker in New York. And I would fly back and do deals with them. Sometimes I would co-list it, and I started to build a name in New York from LA. And then I could just Miami, I could just sense that all my clients were buying there. And honestly, I started investing, and I really couldn't afford LA or New York. So I started investing personally in Miami. So I learned the market. I got licensed there. My wife grew up there. I had some big clients in the art world who were building museums in this kind of ghetto area that I started buying a bunch of small properties, and I could sense it was going to emerge. So I really dove in and learned Miami. And then from there, I kind of all the places that I felt like even I would want to buy. Then I bought a house in Sag Harbor, and I like obsessively learned that market and studied. So each of the places that we work, I'm licensed. I understand the markets entirely. Like I've bought and sold real estate or done deals there myself. So I think for a long answer, I think I just kind of followed where my clients went and my own vision of what I would like to do and where I would like to own properties. And I felt they were the best places to invest and have assets.
I love this. Of just, I think if you can be inspired by one of the many things you've shared, it's just how you follow your heart, right? It's just your story is just so genuinely authentic. And I've seen your name on, in my Instagram feed and all this stuff. And I can tell you guys, it was one of the best conversations that I've ever had with anyone coming on this, because our conversation was just human, right? It wasn't like, we're going to do this and it's this about real estate. This is a journey that we all can go on. So like follow your heart. And you have such an interesting view on mentorship, right? Like when you think about agents joining teams and everything else, explain to them what you spend a lot of the time mentoring your agents on, and it's not what you guys probably think.
I mean, honestly, it's doing exactly what I did myself and working on if I mean, this has to be if the agents are willing to do it and want to do it. And, on a weekly basis, I like to spend time going over their goals with them, helping them elevate if they're open to reading all the same books. But I tell them, just as I'm saying on this, it's like sales is so much of a mind game, and of course learning the data as I discussed, but we like to train our agents and have them, if they're open, to do the same thing that I do. And it's been very successful with a bunch of them. And the ones who do it, you can totally see how their businesses double and triple and they do the biggest deals they've ever done. And I like to look at it where honestly, like I have no ego in this. I just want to make a lot of money so my kids live differently than I grew up, which they definitely are, and not to be spoiled brats, but you know what I mean. And I love to travel and buy art, and I associate like obviously money with getting those things. It's not my sole obsession, but I want my agents to be the same way, to live the lives that they want to live and to build sales organizations for themselves that they're proud of and to constantly elevate. And hopefully they work with us forever. If they don't, I get the business, but that's how we look at it, where we want to help people elevate and empower them. And it's not like I have to be the star or it's me. we want them to grow huge businesses in their own right.
It's just refreshing to hear about brand. It's not about this. It's just about who they are as people. So what's one of your favorite stories about one of your agents manifesting something that, that they didn't believe in, that they wrote down, they followed the process that you shared and it actually happened?
There's one agent that says I can talk about this, so I will. We worked together. We planned like she would do the biggest deal she's ever done in her career, probably within a 3 month period. Attracted a client, double-ended the deal, made a couple $100,000 at once in one transaction, was by far the biggest transaction she ever did, was great for her, got huge recognition, got other deals on the seat on the street. And now I can see like her trajectory. It's like she's broken down that barrier in her mind and she's like consistently elevating and doing a ton of business. And it was just so amazing because we talked about it, planned it, wrote it down, and it just happened so rapidly. And it just was like really wonderful to see, honestly.
Do you find that people in the beginning, when you talk about it, they might be a little resistant to it? Because some people would say it's like woo woo, or based on the fact that you've done this and it works, like people buy in faster.
No, I think some people, they'll like, sometimes people will be like, how'd you get all these clients if you didn't know anyone? Like, how do you work with some of the most successful, interesting people in the world? And I sometimes joke and I'll be like, with my mind, like I attracted them with my mind. And they're like, some people think it's crazy, but like I know that it works. And I look at it like, and by the way, it's constant learning and elevating because you could say to me, like, why aren't you a billionaire right now? Like, everyone has their own journey of how to elevate and how to consistently do it, in my opinion. But I think the more you do it, the easier it is to keep climbing to higher and higher levels. And I think some people are open to it and take suggestions. Some are hesitant in the beginning, some just can't change their mindset. But and then some other people, I think everyone's different. Some people come to me and they're like, look, I want to do exactly what you're doing. I totally believe in this. I've seen it exist in my life before, but I want to elevate it.
No, I think for me as a business coach in the community, I think this is such a timely message, right? I think with an industry amid chaos, right? NAR settlement, Zillow, commission compression, all these different things. It's like, look, just finding somebody that believes in you is so valuable. And like joining a team like this to me is the antithesis of why somebody would join a team, right? Like, it's not always about business, it's about the person, right? And I think in listening to you speak, your entire conversation today was focused on people and goals and personal development, breaking down barriers and stuff, right? And that's what real mentorship is. It's not just business, it's not just life, it's and not or. So, as people go on to try to do something new, what are some of the tips that you have for people that feel stuck, they don't feel they can get started, or ultimately they feel like an imposter, right? Like I want to work with these people, I just don't feel like I fit in.
I think many successful people have imposter syndrome or experience it at some point in their lives. Like I definitely have, where I've been in rooms with like the most famous, successful people in the world in every right. Like I've shown some of the wealthiest people in the world where there's always that moment, especially when I was younger in my career, where you're like, how the fuck did I get in this room? It's amazing. But um, and I think you just constantly keep going. And I try to diminish in my mind, like I said, I try to look at it like we have, as I know of, one life. It's a game. You want to live, I want to live it to the fullest of my ability. And when I look at it in that perspective and I look at these other people, or I listen to biographies, or I, interact with these people, and especially from an entertainment standpoint, where people kind of look at a lot of entertainment people or idolize them, they're just normal people. They just have like a higher belief in their own ability than you do if they're surpassed you. And even in this business, like what I did in the very beginning was study all the top agents. I worked for one of the top agents in history, if not the top agent in history. And I was seeing him like close $100 million deals and double end it like when I walked in the door before I even sold $1 million thing. And I would watch him and I would be like, oh, like he's a normal dude. He's smart. He knows these people. He's worked in the game to do it. He's strategic. Like, and then I figured out what skill sets I could develop to get in that, to be able to transact and negotiate in that way. But I think if you're stuck, the biggest thing that I find is just for me, and I know I sound like a broken record, is I just listen to these things. Like there's a book called The Secrets of the World Class by Steve Seibold. The audiobook has the cheesiest music in the world. It's like actually unbearable, the music in between chapters, but It is so good, and it breaks down the consciousness of like the middle class, the upper class, the world class, and the poverty class, and how each one thinks, and how certain classes trade time for money, and other classes trade ideas for money, and certain classes are defeated by adversity, and certain classes use adversity and expect adversity and welcome it because they know they're going to conquer it and get to the next level. And I find for me, if I was stuck right now, I would immediately buy books like that and start listening to them. I'd write down everything I wanted, even if it was terrifying or laughable, or I wouldn't do it. Like someone just asked me the name of the book again. It's called Secrets of the
We'll
World
get you
Class.
guys, we're gonna reach out to Carl and Julian, and we'll get 5 of his top recommendations. We'll put them in the order he recommends reading it. We'll send it out with the recap and the recording.
But the last thing I was saying is like I would write down my goals no matter how big or like frightening they are, even if they're like mine were laughable. I was walking dogs, picking up dog shit, being like, let me get on the Hollywood Reporter top realtors list and Variety and rep all these wealthy, famous people. And literally as I was writing them, I was like, this is insane. But I just kept going. So that's what I would do if I was stuck. I'd immediately buy and listen or read these books and I'd write down every single thing if you could have anything you wanted that you want.
That's incredible. So, Carl, thank you so much for being here. If people want to ask you a couple questions, you have a couple minutes to stay on.
I have a showing uptown in 40 minutes, so I
All
have to
right.
go soon. But
So,
anyone is welcome to email me or reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anyone.
all right, perfect. So, look, I can definitely say that this was my favorite episode, and
Thank you.
I can't thank you enough for obviously being patient and kind with us today because I didn't think my computer would die, but just being open, right? This is when you think of really successful people, like I will forever remember this about you of just how humble you are and how open you are and how much this was just like a normal conversation, right? This wasn't about deals and listings and pitches and everything. I think what you shared is the message that we all need to hear of we need to work harder on ourselves than our jobs and that anything is possible, right? Like being dreamers, like Robert always says, have big dreams. So thank you, Carl. Any parting words you'd like to share?
No, like I said, I'm an open book. I feel free to reach out to me and thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm gonna bring you back for some more stuff. So
All right.
everybody have a happy Friday. Thank you all for your patience again. Love my heart. Love you all. Thank you, Carl, and everyone have a great weekend. We'll get you guys the recording.
Bye-bye.
But